Betrayal is the most terrible thing that anyone can face. No one is immune to it. A person can say one thing to your face, but do something completely different behind your back. I accidentally saw the love of my life cheating on me with some stranger right in the car. It was a glorious Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in my favorite recliner with a goofy grin on my face and a beer in hand, watching the St. Louis Cardinals dominate the perpetually losing Chicago Cubs 6-0 in the ninth inning. My good friend Jim was on the couch, but he wasn't in as good a mood as I was. The reason for his bad mood was the story of the day. You could say it began in college when I met Jenny, but it really goes back to high school when I met Jim. I was a sophomore on the JV basketball team. I wasn't particularly great. I mostly stayed on the team because I enjoyed playing and the team spirit. The coach said he kept me on the team to show the others that you could still enjoy the game for what it was, but part of me always believed that no better players tried out. Jim was a freshman that the coach had me mentor. Jim showed some promise, and since I knew how to play the game, just not well enough to excel, he had me work one-on-one with Jim to bring him up to speed with the high school level players. I was the youngest of two children, and Jim was an only child, so I sort of became his big brother at school and kept the upperclassmen from picking on him. You have to have a little fun, right? Soon we became good friends off the court as well, and were rarely seen apart. After spending some time at his house, I learned his early life had been difficult. His dad left his mom when Jim was 3, not even bothering to say goodbye. Jim's mom, Brenda, came home from the grocery store with Jim to find that all his dad's clothes and possessions were gone, along with half of the furniture. The good half, of course. Not that they had much to begin with. When Jim was in junior high, Brenda met a nice guy named Phil, and things improved for both of them. Brenda dated Phil for 18 months, and the three of them got along well, so they got married. Jim didn't mind sharing his mom with Phil. Phil seamlessly integrated into their lives, even spending time alone with Jim. It was Phil who encouraged Jim to try out for basketball and helped him keep his grades up so he could stay on the team. Phil was a class act. Jim was getting his life together and even had a new dad, making his family complete. It was easy for him to welcome a big brother into the new family dynamic, and I think Brenda and Phil appreciated having Jim with me because it gave them some alone time. The brotherly connection worked well since we looked similar, both about 6'4", with brown hair, a slim build, and blue eyes. It also worked well for me as I now had someone looking up to me, which is a feeling that can really make your day. On the basketball court, Jim didn't look up to me for very long because he had genuine talent. Coach Smith would tell us what he wanted Jim to work on, and we would do it, as I had a natural understanding of the game from watching the pros and listening to commentators. That was my knack. Coach even called me his unpaid assistant during my senior year. Together, we helped Jim become the star of the varsity team in his junior year. We even made it to the Elite Eight in the state playoffs that year. Then it was time for me to graduate and start my college studies, leaving Jim behind. It was only natural that I chose to study to become a basketball coach. During my freshman year, I tried to persuade the basketball coach, Joe Fields, to let me assist him in any way possible. He dismissed me with a remark, "What could a stinking freshman have to offer?" However, that didn't deter me from attending the games and studying his techniques and strategies. Before long, I could predict his adjustments, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of his players. If the other teams had gotten their hands on my notes, there would have been serious consequences. I returned to my old high school for a couple of their games when my college team was playing away. Jim had some difficulties in his first few games without me. During halftime, I reminded him that Coach Smith always guided me on what to tell him and work on with him. He just needed to trust the coach as he had trusted me and relax because he was playing too tensely. The second half of the game improved significantly. The old Jim was back. Another significant event during my freshman year was meeting Jenny. I encountered her at a party my roommate dragged me to, saying, All work and no play makes Ray a studious burnout. In case you didn't guess, my name is Ray. I was standing by a wall, nursing my first beer, and scanning the room for someone familiar, maybe someone I could talk basketball with. Suddenly, my chest and stomach were drenched and felt about 40 degrees colder. I looked down to see a pretty brunette, about 5'6", with green eyes that captivated me. Oh shit, I'm so sorry. I kind of tripped over something back there, and I'm sorry. I was too captivated by those green eyes to speak a word of anger, shock, or any other emotion. I wasn't exactly a player in high school, but I dated fairly regularly and had 2 or 3 steady girlfriends during my last 2 years. Usually, I'm not at a loss for words around women, but this time, my mind went blank and my heart was racing. Out of habit, she began brushing the excess beer off my shirt while I stood there, trying to catch another glimpse of those serene green eyes I had just seen. She'd had a few beers already, so she wasn't fully alert, continuing to brush my shirt until she noticed a bulge forming in my jeans. Then she looked up at my blank face and asked, "Are you okay? Why aren't you saying anything? Are you high or something?" My brain suddenly kicked into gear. I'm fine, wet and cold, but fine. I just got lost in your beautiful green eyes for a moment. I don't mean to sound like I'm using a pickup line, but I've never seen such a stunning shade of green before, and I just zoned out. Well, aren't you the charmer? You're not bad yourself, just a little on the tall side. Did I mention she'd had a few drinks? She was possibly on the verge of having had too many, as her speech was slightly slurred, and she was wobbling a bit on her 3-inch heels. Now I need another beer. Would you help me get one? I'm having a bit of trouble making my way through the crowd back to the keg. Under normal circumstances, I would have thought it took a lot of nerve to ask someone you just spilled your beer on to refill your drink. Typically, I would have told her that, but those eyes had touched a soft spot in my soul. One of her shoes slipped in the puddle on the floor, and she tumbled into me. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around her, gently holding her up, displaying a steady strength that kept her balanced. The decision was made for me. I realize we don't know each other, but I think you might be close to your limit for the night. How about we sit on the outside porch and talk it over? Then, if you still want another drink, I'll get it for you. Oh, and you're a gentleman too. A girl could get used to this kind of treatment. Let's go have that talk. Once we were outside where the music was quieter, we introduced ourselves and talked for a couple of hours. We started to hit it off and agreed to go on a date the next evening. During the first few weeks, we took things slow, balancing our schedules around school and home basketball games. Initially, she was okay with my obsession, but I could tell it bothered her a little. Once the season ended, we had more time to spend together, and everything was great in Ray and Jennyville. We had been dating for just over 8 months, and things were getting serious between us. My last class on Friday afternoon was on the far west side of campus, and it was a 30-minute walk or a 15-minute bus ride back to my dorm. I was pleasantly surprised to see Jenny's car, a classic 1966 red Mustang, parked on the street just half a block from the building. Her dad spoiled her a bit, but he could afford it. I thought she wanted to get an early start on our date that night and had come to pick me up on that fine, sunny May afternoon. As I got closer, I absent-mindedly planned out the rest of my day. First, stop by the dorm to drop off my textbooks and get ready to leave. Maybe we'll still have time to cuddle a little before going to her place, assuming my roommate left town for home at noon, as he almost always did on Fridays. Then I heard a familiar sound that snapped me out of my reverie, as if a huge rubber band had hit the back of my hand. Jenny sighed. It sounded just like she did after intimacy. Looking at her car more closely, I noticed that one of her legs was sticking out of the rear window at an angle that was familiar to me, but it was supposed to be me who was supposed to be there with her. My anger grew with every step. As the closer I got, the more my suspicions were confirmed. Of course, it's not Jenny. Maybe she lent her car to someone else. I thought. The next thing I remember is standing by the car, staring at the back seat, and watching my Jenny cheat on me with some guy. I heard a noise behind me as the lawn sprinkler turned on, watering the newly planted tree and shrubs a few feet away. Without thinking, I grabbed the hose, folded it, and removed the sprinkler. I took the hose over to the car, partially covered the end with my thumb to increase the pressure, and soaked them both before they knew what was happening. When the guy rushed out of the car, his pants fell down to his ankles. Seizing the opportunity, I landed an uppercut to his face as he looked down at his fallen clothes. He went down like a sack of potatoes. I know because I used to unload them at the grocery store where I worked in high school. Jenny was pulling her skirt down and buttoning her blouse, while angrily getting out of the car. But she couldn't manage because I was still spraying her with the hose. "Who the hell do you think you are? Why did you do that?" I demand. In the middle of her rant, I took my thumb off the hose and let her cold-soaked self see what was happening. I thought I was your boyfriend, but now I see that I was wrong. I was just another guy you were with, shared a bed. Dropping the hose to the ground, I looked into her tearful green eyes, hoping this was the last time. At least I figured it out before I did something stupid. For example, propose to you. You're just a nasty girl of easy virtue. Maybe I don't have as expensive taste as you do, but I know I deserve better than a cheating spouse. By this time, about 10 people had gathered to see what the commotion was about, and more were on the way. They didn't see me hit the jerk, but they heard Jenny's screams and saw a pretty girl being hosed down. Hey, I'd like to take a closer look too. Ray, it's not what you think. I love you, Ray. He just put an end to everything we had. I think you cheated on me. If you didn't, then just tell me. I've heard all these cliches that scammers use when they get caught. For example, it didn't mean anything to me. Well, it meant everything to me. If you love me the way you say you do, then you certainly have a stupid way of showing it. Let's vote, I said to the assembled crowd. How many people here think that a couple who have been dating for 8 months should show their love by making love to someone else in the backseat of their car? Anyone? Just raise your hand. Jenny looked around for the first time and felt very uncomfortable. She was soaked through, her white shirt stuck to her body. Her free hand instinctively reached out to cover herself. "Jenny," I said, trying to calm down. "I've never cheated on you. I didn't even think about it. I won't accept it. Not once. They say he who has cheated once will remain a cheater forever. No wonder they say that. It's often true. It's over between us. Don't call me. Don't come. Just stay away from me. You and that jerk deserve each other. Jenny, do me a favor. Do all decent men a favor. Go to hell and stay there." I witnessed her look at her secret lover with sadness, drop to her knees, and cry. Feeling done, I walked away toward my bus stop. While waiting, I decided it was a pleasant enough day to walk instead and could help clear my mind. Jenny never approached me, which I was mostly thankful for. There were still things I wanted to say to her if she dared face my anger, and questions I probably shouldn't ask. I convinced myself I harbored no resentment towards that deceitful, cowardly cheat, though that was a lie. My second year of college started on a better note. My younger brother had secured a basketball scholarship at the local state U, the only college our family could afford, about 45 miles away. I continued attending games, critiquing the coach's decisions. After each game, Jim and I would discuss my observations, and he found it intriguing to see what might happen if the team tried some of my suggestions. During our 4th home game that year, I caught Jim's attention just before halftime. Our team was struggling against the ISU Redbirds, and Coach Fields was experimenting with different strategies to no avail. I urged Jim to inform the coach that our power forward was left-handed while their corresponding player was right-handed, and vice versa for our other forward against theirs. Despite initial matchups, our opponents had a natural advantage. Desperate for any solution, the coach took my advice. The turning point came in the second half of that game. Everything clicked perfectly for us. Despite trailing by 20 points at halftime, we ended up winning by 15. After the game, Coach asked Jim why he hadn't mentioned it earlier. "Coach, it wasn't my thought. It was my friend Ray's. He's passionate about basketball, and he's pursuing coaching." "Well, when can I meet him? We could definitely benefit from having someone like him on our team." And that's how I got the basketball coach to mentor me. My final year in school passed without much excitement. Jim and I kept each other in check to avoid trouble, but we still managed to have a good time. We both dated casually, and during my senior year, I started a relationship with a wonderful woman named Katie. We connected deeply on many important life values, especially fidelity, but we took things slow due to past relationship challenges. Nevertheless, we ended up getting married a few months after I graduated and began working as an assistant coach for State U's basketball team. Coach Fields appreciated my style and ideas, which often proved beneficial, if I may say so modestly. This job allowed me another year alongside Jim, although our dynamic changed as he became a player and I his assistant coach. Jim had a promising shot at the professional draft, making his senior year pivotal. Throughout the season, we spent as much time as possible refining his skills and strategizing for upcoming games. He excelled that year, and our team looked poised to make a deep run in the Big Dance, providing Jim with national exposure. We entered the NCAA tournament as the underdogs in the first round, but Jim had an outstanding performance, leading us to a 12-point victory. Although we were eliminated in the second round, it was our school's best performance in 15 years, leaving us all feeling quite satisfied. Coach Fields expressed deep pride in each of us and acknowledged the roles we played in our successful season. The school's victory celebration was a blast. Jim made a personal decision amidst talks from experts that he might be drafted, committing to complete his degree regardless. He had decided against joining the European League if he didn't get drafted, prioritizing his close bond with his family over extended time away. The positive outcome was that Jim was selected by the Chicago Bulls late in the third round, which exceeded our expectations of him being picked in the fourth or fifth round by a team much farther away. The Bulls stadium was only a 5-hour drive away. However, the downside came midway through his rookie season, when a severe foul from a Pistons player injured Jim's right knee. Although the Pistons player was ejected, Jim's promising career came to an abrupt end. Meanwhile, Katie and I had settled into our routines. I was studying at State University, and she was working as a chemist, managing quality testing at the local corn and bean processing plant. We saved diligently and managed our finances carefully. As a result, just 18 months after graduating, we were able to purchase our first home, a 3-bedroom ranch. Our plan was to start a family in 5 or 6 years, but for now, we were content enjoying each other's company, focusing on our careers, and making our new home comfortable and stylish. We had been living in our new home for nearly 2 months when we learned about Jim's knee injury. Katie had grown close to him, inevitable given how much time I spent coaching him during my senior year. Inviting him to stay with us temporarily seemed like the natural thing to do until he could figure out his next steps. Jim resisted the idea, insisting on moving in with his mom and Phil, but he wanted to stay in touch, so we visited him regularly for a while. Katie didn't mind. It gave her more time with my parents when we visited. After completing rehab from his 2 surgeries, Jim could walk without much of a limp. Some people didn't even notice unless they knew to look for it. He landed a job as an insurance agent at a prominent company in our hometown. His local sports fame opened many doors for him, but it was his genuine kindness and charm that sealed the deals. Life was good for all 3 of us. During the off-season, most weekends, we would either travel back home to visit family and Jim, or Jim would drive over and spend the weekend with us, staying in our spare bedroom. Last week, Katie asked Jim about his romantic life, mentioning she had a friend at work who might be interested in meeting a good guy. Jim mentioned he had been dating the same girl for about a month and was optimistic about the relationship. I've been thinking it's about time for you guys to meet her. So I'll ask if she wants to come along next weekend to stay with us, if that's okay with you. Jim, that sounds wonderful. We have 3 bedrooms, so she can have her own room, or if you both prefer, you can share one. It's up to you. I smiled, winked, and nodded. We're excited to meet the woman who's captured my buddy's heart. I chuckled and playfully punched his shoulder. She hasn't managed to involve me yet. Let's just say she's preparing the lasso. Jim grinned as he tossed my metaphor back at me. He wouldn't divulge any more details about her besides mentioning that she was attractive and special. That was 6 days ago. Today I was out on my usual 3-mile Saturday morning run expecting Jim and his mystery girl to arrive around noon for lunch. So when I returned home at 10 o'clock, I figured I had enough time for a shower and some rest before their arrival. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Boy, was I wrong. As I turned the corner onto my street on the way home, I noticed a red car parked in my driveway, but I didn't recognize it. As I approached, a sinking feeling washed over me, and all the hurt and frustration from my freshman year came rushing back. I couldn't believe that he had somehow gotten involved with that foolish Jenny. The license plate confirmed my worst fears. My initial impulse was to swing open the front door and yell, "Get that cheating woman out of my house." As I reached for the storm door handle, I paused and reconsidered. How would that affect my relationship with Jim? I wondered. No, as much as I was tempted, as much as she deserved it. I couldn't bring myself to do that to Jim. I took a deep breath and paused to collect my thoughts. I decided to suppress my emotions for now and later approach Jim tactfully. He would be more open to that approach and perhaps I could spare him some heartache. If he didn't listen to my advice, I was sure she wouldn't return willingly any more than I wanted her to. Either way, this would be the last time she set foot in my home. After another deep breath, I grasped the door handle once more, hesitated briefly, then finally opened the door to my home and my role as an actor. There he is. Jim called out to the girls in the other room as I entered. "Jim, you're here early. If I had known, I would have gone for my run already. Good to see you." We exchanged a one-armed hug, as we always did. Katie and Jenny entered from the kitchen to join the introductions. I held to the data of Narration, because I knew who she was, and perhaps she hadn't realized that Jim's friend Ray was actually her old boyfriend Ray. I was correct. Jenny followed Katie into the family room and noticed the cold expression on my face. She stifled a surprised noise with her hand, looking like she might faint. "Hello, Jenny," I said calmly. "Long time no see." "Oh, you two know each other?" Jim asked. "Yeah. We met at a party back in my freshman year of college." I turned away from Jenny, adjusting my expression to something more friendly, and turned to Jim. "So, do you think the Cardinals will win the division this year?" I guided him away from the women and towards the TV airing a preview of the baseball game later that afternoon. I thought it might be amusing to subtly tease Jenny if I could restrain myself from being outright rude. Katie looked at me in disbelief at my apparent rudeness. Then she glanced at Jenny and saw her expression, realizing there was more to the story. Katie attempted to lead Jenny back to the kitchen, ostensibly to fetch some lemonades for everyone, but clearly to investigate further. Jenny, afraid of what I might reveal, chose to stay close to Jim. After a moment, I remembered I needed to shower and excuse myself. I had just turned on the water and was nearly undressed when Katie walked into our bathroom with the inevitable question, "What was that all about?" It's a bit of a lengthy story that I never shared with you because I didn't want to revisit those old wounds. She's the reason I preferred to take things slow in our relationship. I'd rather not delve into all the details right now. I'll explain everything later. Just know that this is the last time that woman will set foot in this house. She stared at me in disbelief. I realized my voice might have been too loud, but I hoped the noise from the shower would mask it. "You can't mean that. She seems like a nice person. What if she and Jim hit it off and end up getting married? Will you stop seeing Jim?" "I really hope it doesn't come to that. I suppose Jim will have to come alone then. I shut the shower door, hoping to put an end to the conversation. However, I knew Katie well enough. I did say, hoping. The remainder of the day was filled with tension. Jim could sense something was amiss, but Jenny stayed close to him at all times. I could afford to be patient. I wasn't eager to confront the situation at all. Nighttime arrived, and as I anticipated, they shared the queen-sized bed in the first guest room. When I turned off our bedroom light and lay down, I knew the next phase of our discussion was imminent. I initiated the conversation. Over the next hour, I recounted in detail our initial meeting, our dating period, and the public breakup. I attempted to remain impartial, but emotions ran high, especially concerning my ex-girlfriend's betrayal. I even revealed that I had been considering proposing marriage to Jenny soon before I discovered them together that day. Her first question caught me off guard, as I had never contemplated it. Do you still have feelings for her? Only disgust and a bit of anger. I made it clear that I have zero tolerance for cheating, not even once, and that applies to you as well. It would be hypocritical of me to even think about cheating myself, especially with someone like her. After what she did to me, I could never inflict that pain on someone I love. I'd sooner drive myself off a cliff. If she hurts Jim, I might just have to put her in her damn Mustang and send her over a cliff. Okay, I believe you. Just calm down, or they might hear you. What are you going to tell Jim? You have to tell him something. He's wondering what happened between the two of you. At first I wanted to confront her and tell her to leave my home, but I held back because I didn't want to hurt Jim. I won't go into specifics unless he asks, but I will warn him to be cautious because she has a history of cheating and might do it again. I wonder what she's been telling him, though. I'm sure he's been questioning her too. Maybe she'll come clean to him, so you won't have to explain. I think you should try to tolerate her, at least for Jim's sake. I'm not suggesting you be friendly. Just avoid being cold or rude. Can you manage that? For Jim. I hope their relationship doesn't get serious, but I'll consider it because he's like a brother to me, closer than my own. I really hope they break up soon. The remainder of the weekend was nearly as tense as Saturday, but with Katie on my side now, it felt somewhat more manageable. Perhaps it was because I had confided in her the previous night, though I wouldn't admit to considering that as a factor. It's important to maintain my reputation. They departed shortly after lunch on Sunday. I'm certain Jim sensed the tension too. I regretted that he didn't stay for the afternoon game. It was just a glimpse of the potential rift if she came between us. After their departure, Katie and I had a lengthy discussion. She agreed that I needed to talk to Jim, and together we devised a plan for how and when to approach him. She made some adjustments to my initial ideas, but felt I was being fair to everyone involved. She even raised a few insightful points about different scenarios. I had planned to call Jim on Monday evening after dinner, but my afternoon at work took an unexpected turn when Jenny walked into my office while I was reviewing the recruiting reports for our new recruits. My door was ajar, so she entered and, catching me off guard, began, "Ray, I was wondering if..." I spun around in my chair, clearly surprised. When I saw her, my initial shock gave way to a composed reaction, albeit without the usual startle. I sighed audibly. I probably should have seen this coming, but I thought it would be a phone call. "Please have a seat, Jenny." She moved to shut the door before sitting down, to which I replied, "No, leave it open. If you close it, the guys might get the wrong idea, especially with a woman in here. We hardly ever shut our office doors. None of the coaches do. It's part of our open-door policy, and the school takes it literally. I could ask what you want, but I think we both know already. I'm being upfront. I intend to warn Jim about you. However, I won't go into all the unpleasant details unless he presses me. I don't want to relive that again, so he'll really have to pry. I wouldn't be a good friend if I didn't give him a heads up, but I hope you've changed. For things to work with you and Jim, though honestly, I hope they don't, you must be completely faithful to him. 2 more things. I'll be keeping an eye on you. I still have friends who would gladly help Jim if he needs to get rid of a cheating girlfriend. They'll be watching too. Lastly, if you hurt him like you hurt me, you better run fast and far. If I find you, there's no coming back from that. Ray, I wanted to say something earlier, but you've covered it well. It's fair, given what happened between us. I still want to say I'm sorry. He was an old boyfriend from high school. I skipped class and had a few beers with him. Things escalated. Stop right there. You don't owe me an explanation, and I really don't want to hear any excuses. It happened over 6 years ago. I told Katie what happened, and she asked if I still had any feelings for you. I honestly told her it's mostly anger and disgust, especially disgust these days. Jenny looked surprised by this revelation. I think she hoped I might have some positive feelings left to keep quiet. Maybe I'm flattering myself. Who knows? I also said I'd tolerate you only when Jim's around. That means you're not welcome in my home or my life unless he's with you. I won't try to mess with your relationship with Jim, just because I don't want to upset him. He's been like a little brother to me for over 10 years, and in my family, family comes first. So I'm trying to be fair and not seek revenge for what you did. I'm telling you now, don't give me a reason to come after you. Ray, I'm really sorry. I can only imagine how much I hurt you for you to still feel this way after all this time. I want you to know I never meant for it to happen. I thought we had something special, you and I. Now I feel that way about Jim. Don't worry. I've matured a lot since then. After we broke up, I cried for days. Then, upon reflection, I realized I was solely responsible for what happened. I couldn't bring myself to face you to apologize and explain. Your last words to me were, "Go to hell and don't come back." I felt like I was in hell without you, and I knew it was my own doing. I almost failed that semester. Fine, you've had your say, but I'm not changing my mind. I still can't trust that you won't cheat again. Remember what I said that day. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Can you honestly tell me that was the only time you've cheated? She avoided eye contact, ashamed. Dan, I was hoping you wouldn't say that. It was before I met you. She still wouldn't meet my eyes, so I knew she was lying. It doesn't matter now. Cheating is cheating. How could you put someone you claim to care about through that emotional turmoil? I questioned what I did, or didn't do, to make you betray me. I wondered if I wasn't satisfying you, if I wasn't good enough. First, I was angry at you. Then I was angry at myself for whatever I might have lacked. I agonized over how long it had been happening, and why. Was it a one-time thing, or had it been going on throughout our entire relationship? It took me several months before I felt ready to trust another woman enough to start dating again. Even then, I questioned whether I could measure up to her expectations. Unless you've experienced it yourself, you can't understand the pain of being betrayed. That's why I won't allow you to hurt Jim. And if you do, I understand where you're coming from. I want you to know that I've grown emotionally, and I haven't cheated since. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. It's been long enough now that I've moved on. The love of a good woman, Katie, has helped me heal. I've forgiven you, but I won't forget what you did. I can't. When I saw your car in my driveway, the image of that guy with you in the back seat was as vivid as the first time I saw it. I think we both understand where we stand now. So goodbye. I turned back to my reports, pretending to read them as I waited for her to leave my office. I heard her get up and thought she was leaving when I felt her hand caress the back of my neck. If you remember, we were pretty good together. I could make it worth your while if you could see your way too. I spun around suddenly with a furious glare. I spoke slowly, barely containing my anger through clenched teeth. Get out of my office right now. She didn't hesitate to leave. I couldn't believe she would try something like that. She knows I'm married, and my stance on fidelity. I paced around the gym to calm down. How does she still have this effect on me? It's unbelievable. One moment she's promising she's changed and will be faithful to Jim, and the next she's attempting to seduce me, essentially cheating on him with me. Did she really think I was interested in that? I've been clear about my boundaries from the start. I was even more thankful now that she was out of my life and Katie was in. That night I arrived home, just as Katie pulled into the driveway ahead of me. Stepping out of my car, I called out to her as she hurried into the house from the garage. "Babe, you won't believe what happened to me today." She quickly disappeared inside, so I assumed she needed to use the bathroom urgently. I entered the house casually, thinking I'd have to wait until she was ready to hear about my eventful afternoon. To my surprise, she was waiting just inside the door and immediately confronted me. "I thought we agreed you'd be civil to Jenny for Jim's sake." She called me this afternoon in tears, saying you threw her out of your office and told her off. What did she do to deserve that? Ray, why would you do such a thing? She was completely hysterical. Whoa, slow down. She told you what? She said she came to apologize and try to be civil for Jim's sake. She just wants us to get along. And you told her to go to hell and threw her out of your office. Did you? Well, she's not entirely wrong. I can't believe you'd do this, Jim. We had a plan. And now you. Hold on, let me explain. You would have done the same. Let me tell you everything. It took some time, but I recounted the whole story as best as I could. You expect me to believe that, Ray? She flirted with you, so you lost your temper and kicked her out. Please. As far as I remember, that's exactly what happened. I explained everything to her, exactly as we had planned. I tried to stay calm and didn't raise my voice until the very end. I couldn't believe that after telling me about her supposed change, she suddenly began massaging my neck and offering intimacy to calm me down. It really made me realize how much better I feel with you. It's a whole story, Ray. She told me she came to apologize to you. Then you threatened to tell Jim everything, even made up some kind of lie. You joked that it would ruin her in his eyes. I know you can be vindictive at times. She said she really cares about Jim, and she can't let you do that. She confessed that she regretted hurting you, explaining that she was young, stupid, and a little drunk. She even offered to do everything to fix everything, including telling Jim about your story if you didn't lie or exaggerate. Then you told her to either accept it or leave my office, and she left. Okay, I understand that if you were concerned about Jenny and me, it might seem plausible that any jealousy you feel would make you believe that, especially coupled with your natural sympathy for a crying woman. Just remember our open door policy at work. My office door has to remain open except for specific confidential matters. If it closes, it triggers an email alert to Coach Fields. So do you really think that I would yell at her and demand intimacy with an open door? Am I that foolish? Oh, Ray, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot about that. I shouldn't have doubted you. Can you forgive me? Of course I can. I know how convincing and manipulative she can be. She exploited your feelings and had you on her side before you could question her. She's trouble, even more than I realized. Now she's trying to wedge herself between us. I'm worried she'll do the same with Jim and me. I'm not looking forward to talking to Jim tonight. Right on time. The phone rang. We exchanged glances, and a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Just as I had feared, it was Jim. Ray, we need to talk. Jim began as soon as I managed to say hello. In fact, there's a hell of a lot to talk about. What the hell were you thinking? I just left Jenny at her place, and she was bawling her eyes out. It was so bad I could barely understand her. All I kept hearing was Ray. And each time she said it, she broke down even more. Then she blurted out, Ray hit on me. After that, she went berserk and locked herself in her room. I think she cried herself to sleep. So I came out here to find out what the hell you did to her. If you hit on her, Ray, I swear I'll tear you into so many pieces they won't find a trace. What the hell is going on? Jim, I replied as calmly as possible. Take a breath. Man, we can talk about this. I'll explain everything that happened, starting from the beginning, or if you prefer, I can give you the condensed version of today. Let's start with today, Jim said, audibly calming down as he spoke. Hey, I understand why you're upset. It might sound unbelievable, but here's what happened today. As you probably noticed when you introduced her on Saturday, Jenny and I knew each other. To keep it brief, we dated for about 8 months during my first year of college. When she saw me and realized we were friends, she got concerned about what I might tell you about her. As you saw, she stuck close to you all weekend. But I didn't say a word. Today, shortly after lunch, she came to my office. Before she could ask me not to say anything to you, I told her straight up that you mean a lot to me like family, and I felt I had to give you a heads up about her. I mentioned that I hoped she had changed, but I was worried she might not have, or that she could revert to her old ways in the future. I had intended to tell you, without getting into specifics, that after we dated for 8 months, she was unfaithful. I informed her that I would tolerate her presence for your sake, but made it clear that without your influence, she wouldn't be welcome either. We discussed the incident, and she attempted to justify it. But I reminded her it was in the past, 6 years ago and over. She tried to apologize for it, insisting it was a one-time occurrence. I assured her I had forgiven her long ago, though trust and forgetfulness were another matter. Afterward, I told her we both understood where we stood, and it was time for her to leave. When I got home, Katie was furious and yelling, because Jenny had called her in tears, claiming I had yelled at her and made advances in my office. Consider that for a moment. My office, where the open-door policy is strictly enforced. You know how it is there. If I had done such a thing, I'd be out of there immediately. I managed to calm Katie down just before your call. I had planned to discuss this with you later tonight, but not under these circumstances. Jim, I'm sorry I didn't want to burden you with this, but I couldn't stay silent. Family supports each other. We watch out for one another. Perhaps she has changed, as she claimed, but I can't be certain. I don't know what's going on in her mind. All I know is, I couldn't forgive myself if she caused you the same pain she caused me without warning you. I'm truly sorry you're caught up in this mess. There was silence on the other end, only his breathing audible. He was digesting everything I had said, clearly struggling to reconcile it with what his beloved had told him. He had fallen hard for her, or else he would have used his logical mind to see the truth, or at least recognize that I wouldn't be foolish enough to make advances in my own office. I was hoping that he would realize I was likely correct, or at least give me the benefit of doubt, so we could talk calmly later. However, I expected him to be angry, possibly accusing me for a while because someone had deceived him. Then we could have a discussion. Another possibility, I feared, was that he would believe her, and she would succeed in destroying our friendship. Ray, you deceitful liar. You're fabricating things about her just to get back at her for breaking up with you. It's time to grow up, man. It's been 6 years, as you said. I treated you like family. And this is how you repay me. I finally found happiness with her, but your envy and desire for revenge are threatening to ruin it for me. I can't believe you would prioritize your issues over my happiness. Goodbye, Ray. Go to hell and stay there. Sadly, I placed the phone back on its cradle, thinking, option 3 is the worst. I might have lost my best friend. How did it go, dear? Asked Katie. About as badly as it could have, I replied sadly. I noticed you didn't mention that she made you an offer. Yeah, given his state, he wouldn't have believed me. Honestly, I'm not sure I would have believed myself if I weren't there. It also felt like too much to drop on him all at once. You're probably right. She hugged me. I just hope he reflects on it and comes to his senses with time. You've been close for so long. He'll miss you and come back, I'm sure. I hope you're right. The following day, I followed through with my promise to keep an eye on her. I unearthed an old photograph of Jenny that I had tucked away in a box of college memorabilia. I wasn't sure why I had kept it, but now I was grateful that I had. I scanned the photo and emailed it to a couple of buddies who were single and frequented the bars back in our hometown. I phoned them to explain the situation and requested that they watch over her. I also mentioned that Jim and I had a falling out because of this. One of them asked if this was my way of getting back at her for coming between us. I assured him that I couldn't care less about her. This wasn't for my sake. It was for Jim's. Wouldn't you want your friends to watch over her if you were in Jim's position? I instructed them not to discuss this with Jim since he was furious with me and might direct his anger towards them as well. I didn't want him to be angry with everyone who cared about him. Right now, he was blinded by love and not thinking rationally. We've all been there at least once. I emphasized that they shouldn't follow her, stalk her, or anything of the sort. I simply wanted them to observe where she frequented, and if they witnessed any questionable behavior, they should report it, preferably to Jim. If they were too hesitant to do that, they could send the photos to my phone, and I would handle it from there. One of my old friends, Steve, surprised me by suggesting we test her fidelity. Being the Casanova type, he figured he'd flirt with her a few times. If she resisted, she was trustworthy. I warned him against it, fearing Jim's anger if he thought we were setting her up. I made it clear. No hitting on her, understand. They reluctantly agreed to help, and I had almost a dozen spies on the case. I hoped it wouldn't all be in vain. 2 months passed, and I missed Jim terribly. I'd emailed him several times to apologize and make amends. I told him I felt like I was in hell without him. His reply was curt. Stay there. Rich, one of my spies, sent me a photo of Jenny dancing with another guy at a bar. He was of average height with sandy hair. I called Rich immediately after seeing it. Rich, it's Ray. How are you? Fine, Ray. I think that's your girl dancing with some sleazebag in the photo. I took it last night. Thought I'd send it to you first, just in case it's her. It's definitely Jenny. I was really hoping she'd stop cheating. What happened after they danced? I didn't see her arrive, so I'm not sure how long she was there or if she came alone. They kissed a bit, but it didn't seem too intimate to me. Just harmless stuff. She left about 15 minutes later, by herself. He stayed and danced for another hour or so. It seemed innocent. You might be right, Rich. I won't intervene since it seems innocent, but keep me informed if she does anything else, okay? Sure thing, Ray. It's kind of like being a private detective. Maybe next time I'll follow her out to the parking lot since I know it's her. Rich, just be careful. We're not stalking her. We're just looking out for Jim. Only intervene if she's clearly doing something wrong, and keep your distance. If I'm mistaken, I don't want Jim to get angry with you. We're just trying to watch out for him. I appreciate you looking out, Ray. You're a good friend. That's what friends do, right? Thanks for the update. Talk to you later. I attempted to reach Jim on his cell phone numerous times, but each time he ignored my calls and let them go to voicemail upon seeing my number. It made me feel as though I had betrayed him, and I desperately wanted his forgiveness. Against all logic, I hoped that she wouldn't mistreat Jim. Around 6 weeks later, Quince, another person in my circle, called and sent me a picture of Jenny leaving a bar with a tall guy, who only about 5 or 6 inches taller than her. Too short to be Jim. They appeared to be enjoying themselves, although I could only see half of the guy's face. Quince mentioned that he followed them to the parking lot, but they departed in separate cars. He informed me that they kissed for a minute or two before Jenny drove off, though he couldn't capture pictures in the dark lot. It seemed she was becoming more daring. 2 weeks later, in a different bar, Paul sent me photos of Jenny with a sturdy, muscular guy, a bit taller than her. The first picture showed them dirty dancing, and in the second, they were deeply kissing at their table. According to Paul, they spent about 10 minutes in her car, always sitting up front with their heads visible. They did continue kissing, but it was too dark for his camera phone to capture well. The situation didn't look promising. It was a Thursday night when Rich and his fellow spy, Oscar, were at the Come On Inn enjoying drinks and the band. Suddenly, Jenny entered with Jim. Looks like the lovebirds are still together, observed Oscar. nudging Rich to look at the couple entering the bar. "I guess she won't be looking for any excitement tonight. This could get very interesting. Isn't that the same guy Paul caught her with before, in that booth over there?" "Damn, good eye. I think it is. Let's get our cameras ready in case something happens. Ray will definitely want to see the pictures if things go down." Jim and Jenny found a secluded table where they could have some privacy, away from her mystery man, later identified as Nate. Soon, they got their drinks and hit the dance floor when a good song played. It took Nate 2 dances to spot Jenny with Jim, and he clearly didn't approve. He approached them with a displeased expression, tapped Jim's shoulder abruptly, and with a forceful tone said, "Mind if I cut in?" "No, I thought so." With that, he pushed between them and whisked a surprised Jenny away from Jim into the dancing crowd. Recovering from the initial shock, Jim craned his neck and used his height to survey the area, while Nate led Jenny down the hallway to the restrooms. Acting quickly, Jim followed them and reached the short hallway leading to the restrooms, just in time to see the back door close. He jumped out into the street at the speed of a bullet, but discovered that it was a fire exit. Once you get out, there is no way back. It took almost 5 minutes after they walked around the building and convinced the bouncer that they had mistakenly left through the back door. Looking around the dance floor, they were nowhere to be seen. Remembering that they had last been seen heading for the toilets, Jim suspected that Nate might have lured Jenny into one of them after opening the back door to lure him outside. Jim pushed his way through the crowded dance floor and finally found himself back in the hallway. In his haste, he did not notice that the back door was closing again. He heard screams coming from the men's room, opened the door, and saw that Nate was lying on the floor, holding between his legs with one hand and his face with the other. Jenny was standing against the far wall, covering her face with her hands, and was clearly scared. Jim's anger softened as he hurried over to Jenny and hugged her. He immediately got the impression that Nate was trying to harm Jenny or attack her, and she defended herself by hitting him in a vulnerable place. Jim reassured Jenny. "It's all right, Jenny. He won't harm you anymore, especially with me here. I didn't realize you knew self-defense. You really handled him well. He deserved it, though. Let's step outside, and I'll have them call the police." "No," Jenny exclaimed, then realized she was overreacting. Collecting herself, she continued, "I mean, you're right. It's fine now. Why let it ruin our evening? He'll nurse his wounds, and I'm sure he won't attempt this again. Just let it be, Jim." Nate's groans were starting to fade. Jenny worried he might regain his senses soon. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself and told Jim, "I think I'm ready to head home now. Tonight's been eventful enough. Are you sure you don't want me to call the police? What if he tries this again, on you or someone else? You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" "I'm confident he won't try it again," she said, glancing at Nate curled up near the urinals. "At least not with me," she added softly. "Oscar and Rich called me the next day and recounted the events of the evening. So she left with Jim, making Jim think that she took Nate down." I asked incredulously. "Yep. I had to sneak out through the back door quickly to get some first aid on my hand. I thought I might need stitches, but a couple of butterfly strips did the trick. That guy's face is as tough as it is ugly. Oscar, I appreciate you going the extra mile. I really didn't expect any violence." "No problem, Ray. When we saw him dragging her off to the restrooms, we followed to ensure Jim had backup. He fell for the trick with the open back door, but we noticed the men's room door closing too. Rich followed Jim outside, and I went in. I pretended to be really drunk and needing to pee, so they ignored me. When he started getting rough with her, well, I don't tolerate anyone mistreating a woman no matter what. I kicked him in the balls from behind, spun him around, and punched him in the face. Then I got out. He probably wishes I hadn't been wearing my steel toe boots. By then, Ray, I was behind Jim, staying outside the restroom and listening in case he needed backup," added Rich. "I went in after they came out. It was Nate Perkins. You remember him, right? He lived on my street, a couple years ahead of us in school. He got kicked off the football and track teams for his temper. He was a mess. Oscar really messed him up good. I asked if he needed help, and he just wheezed at me, so I said, "All right," and walked away. I never liked him anyway. He's just a bully. Oscar spoke up asking, "Will you inform Jim about the true story?" I doubt it. We lack sufficient evidence. It's mostly hearsay and bits overheard. If you were Jim, would you consider this enough? No, probably not. But Rich added, if I were in his shoes, I'd want to be warned so I could keep an eye out, or at least avoid doing things like giving her expensive gifts or cash. She's got him wrapped around her finger so tightly he hasn't seen daylight in a month. Oscar chimed in. He'll find a reason not to believe it. Trust me. I've been there myself. We all have. We'd shoot the messenger and move on. Without solid proof, he'll only get more furious. I guess you're right. Thanks a lot, guys. Next time I'm in town, drinks are on me. Next time I'm in town, drinks are on me. Absolutely, agreed Rich. Whiskey for me, Oscar added. You got it. See you later, guys. Later that night, I recounted to Katie what the guys had told me. I just can't figure out what's going on in her head. If she can't be satisfied with one guy, why not find someone who's into open relationships? Jim and I definitely aren't up for sharing, and she must know that too. That rule about not sharing goes both ways. Buddy, Katie reminded me firmly. I better not catch you sneaking around behind my back or else. She playfully pointed her finger at me like a gun and pretended to shoot. Hey, I'm no hypocrite. I'm loyal to one woman only. I can see how she caused trouble between Jim and me. But I don't get why she thought she could interfere between you and me, or why she'd even want to try. What's really going on here that I'm missing? I don't think there's much to it. She probably figured attacking first was her best defense. Maybe she wanted to distract you from telling Jim. So she threw you off balance by involving me. I don't appreciate being used like that. You're probably right. Man, she's really starting to annoy me. I wish this whole thing was over. And the next day after lunch, I was sitting at my desk when my phone rang. The caller ID showed that it was Nick Wilson, one of my acquaintances, a construction foreman who called. Maybe he had additional information about Jenny, or maybe he just wanted to chat. There's only one way to find out. Hi Nick, what's going on? Hi Ray, does that girl we're following drive a red 60s Mustang? I thought you mentioned it, but I wasn't sure. Yes, that's her. The signs say Gen 1. It's a classic that her father gave her when she was 18, but she doesn't seem to like it very much. I think I found something worthwhile. For the past few weeks, one of our Mexican guys has been bragging that he slept with some white chick during lunch and then sent her home to her boyfriend for a second round. I noticed her giving him a ride today, and guess what? It was a red Mustang from the mid-60s. He talks about meeting her on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, parking in a nearby alley to fool around in the back seat. She even brings him lunch. I'll be ready to meet them on Wednesday. Take some photos. Maybe he just talks a lot, but I'll confirm it. Just be careful, Nick. If it isn't Jenny, you could get in trouble. We don't want any problems for you or anyone else. We just need to prove that she's cheating and tell Jim. He'll decide what to do. I'll handle it. Most of the guys here respect us in the leadership, and the rest stay away to avoid trouble with the inspectors. He grinned. It was almost 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon when Nick called me and asked if I had checked my email recently. When I opened it, I found 9 photos of Jenny with a Mexican in the back seat of her car. Nick also sent a video file explaining how he secretly recorded them, even capturing a Wendy's bag on the front console. All I could manage in response was a desperate, "Damn." At 11:30 on Friday, I arranged to meet Jim at his office under an assumed name, knowing that he did not want to see me. At the direction of the secretary, I hurried to the third door on the right, intending to get to it before he could intercept me in the hallway. To my surprise, he was already sitting at his desk, collecting some notes, when I entered and closed the door behind me. He looked up, clearly about to object, but I interrupted him. "Before you kick me out, remember the good times and do me a favor. Watch this." I put a small DVD player on his desk, which was already playing a video showing the operator approaching a red Mustang with the license plate Gen 1. Then the camera moved along the car, recording the sounds. The feeling of déjà vu that I experienced was palpable when I realized that I was about to hear it, while Jim was watching it. The camera focused on the back seat, clearly showing how Jenny was cheating on him. Jim's face turned white, maybe even a little green. I thought he might need to take out the trash can. He reacted the same way I did when I saw it. Fortunately, he hadn't had lunch yet. I turned off the video player. He saw enough. After he finished, I handed him a paper towel I'd taken from the bathroom to wipe his face. "Jim, I'm really sorry I had to show you this. If you're still mad at me, I get it, and I'll leave without causing any trouble. But you needed to see it. I didn't record this. One of our friends did. Only the three of us know. There's just that one copy now because he taped over the original, and I deleted it from my computer after making that copy. He's sworn to keep it quiet. They'd been meeting for 3 or 4 weeks. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as far as we know. Figures," Jim said, spitting into the trash can. "Those are the days we have lunch meetings with my boss. She knew I'd be occupied. There's one more thing. Assuming their routine holds, they'll meet in about 15 minutes, and I know where if you're interested. Let's go." "Sure, but let me drive. You probably shouldn't be driving right now." The car ride was silent for a while. I could tell Jim was trying to process the news. Then suddenly he spoke. "Ray, I'm sorry. I never should have believed her over you. She told me you broke up with her when you saw her with another guy. She said you flipped out, causing a scene. She even thought you wanted to reconcile with her and start something on the side, but I talked her out of telling Katie. I should have known better, bro. That's just not like you. I'm sorry, man. Don't worry about it. We're friends. I'm just sorry that she caused problems between us, and that I missed you all the time we were apart. When you called me that day, she had already spread lies to Katie. When I got home, Katie gave me a hard time and scolded me for flirting with Jenny and making her cry. She did what? I'm going to confront that deceitful woman. Take it easy, Jim. We don't need you getting into trouble because of her. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve payback, but think before you act. The best revenge isn't worth it if she ends up laughing at you from behind bars. Yeah, you're right. I'll try to stay calm. By the way, it was Oscar who fought with Nate Perkins in the bathroom that night, not Jenny. I guess she didn't tell you the whole story of what happened. No way. What else has she been hiding? I spent the rest of the drive filling in the details of that story. We drove slowly past the alley, and about 3 houses down, there was a red Mustang parked on the right side. A large truck was parked across the alley, blocking any passage through. We parked on the street beyond the alley and approached the familiar sight of the bouncing red car. Jim walked up beside me, his expression melting as he spotted them. He hesitated, realizing the gravity of the situation, ready to swing open the car door, but I stopped him. Placing a finger to my lips, I gestured for him to stay quiet, whispering, I have an idea. While the oblivious couple continued their activities, Jim and I moved towards the truck parked across the alley. I began connecting a hose to its tank, a water truck, recognizable from the sign on its side, often used for filling backyard pools. Jim caught on quickly, adding another section of hose to mine. Carefully, he fed his end through the open window into the front seat, signaling to me. I turned the valve fully open. In moments, the car interior began filling with water, spilling out of the open windows. We stepped back, watching with amusement. Jim and I burst into laughter as heads popped up from the submerged car, spluttering and coughing. Our amusement peaked as clothing items started floating out like a waterfall onto the street. Laughter from behind us drew our attention to Nick, who was struggling to catch his breath amid his own fits of laughter. When Jenny leaned out the window, I turned off the water. She reached for the door handle and opened it. As the large waves surged into the alley, she emerged, unaware she was topless, and stormed over to us in anger. "You bastards! Ray, I should have known you were behind this. If you wanted to sleep with me, you didn't have to." I interrupted her. "I never want anything to do with you or your cheating ways again. I thought I made that clear years ago, and again last month in my office. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you'll just keep repeating them. You got wet last time. This time you got soaked. And by the way, I don't know what gives you the right to mess with my marriage and my friendship, but you better cover up before you get arrested. Looks like your bra is heading for the sewer drain over there." She glanced down and realized I was right. Blushing furiously, she looked around to see her undergarments swiftly floating away downstream. This prompted another round of laughter from the three of us as she hurriedly chased after them, her soaked skirt slipping down to her knees, nearly causing her to fall before she managed to pull it back up. Manny had managed to find enough of his clothes to look somewhat normal, but he was still completely drenched. He approached us, shouting angrily in Spanish, likely cursing us out. Then he noticed Nick and abruptly changed his mind about whatever punishment he had in mind for us. Nick spoke up. "Manny, I'll give you a ride back to work. I parked at the end of the alley. Hop in the back of the truck. You're too wet to sit in the cab. Sorry about your lunch." "Well, actually, I'm not. You were messing around with my buddy's girlfriend." Manny headed towards the truck, grumbling to himself. Jim asked, "Nick, what brought you here? I hate to break it to you, but I'm the guy who filmed that video you watched. Ray mentioned he was stopping by today, and I figured you guys would be here, so I came to lend a hand. Looks like you had things handled, though, so I'll be on my way. What made you flood the car?" He held up his phone. It was Ray's idea. I was just about to drag him out and teach him a lesson, but Ray stopped me and, well, you saw the rest. It would have been even funnier if... Yeah, I understand how you feel, buddy. I've been through it myself, and I got the scars to prove it. If you ever need anything, just give me a call." Nick gave him a quick hug and started walking away. He called back, "Stay in touch, Jim. Thanks, I know who my true friends are now. And that includes you, Ray," he said, turning to me. We exchanged another hug with a friendly pat on the back. Just then, we noticed Jenny walking towards us up the alley. Nick, heading towards her, paused to pick up a piece of pink fabric and tossed it into a nearby tree. It snagged on a branch and unfurled. Jenny's shirt. We chuckled at her furious expression. Nick laughed loudly as he walked off. Jenny was absolutely livid, dripping wet and sloshing with every step, clutching lacy underwear to her chest with one arm. If anything, she seemed even angrier than before. Suddenly, we heard the water truck driver shouting angrily about his missing water. I went to sort it out, while Jim and Jenny exchanged heated words. I explained to the driver what had happened and offered to compensate him for the entire truckload, but he refused, saying, "I wish I could have seen that cheating woman get what she deserved." Returning to the car, I found Jenny starting it up, preparing to leave. Jim delivered his final words to her. "Jenny, I never want to see your deceitful face again. If you need anything from my place, send a friend to get it. And one more thing, Jenny. Take your lying, cheating, low-life self straight to hell." I joined in with Jim, finishing together. And stay there. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.